Usually when we talk about the world around us, the things we can see or touch or, believe in, we just kind of assume there's this baseline of shared objective reality.
Oh, absolutely. We definitely rely on that.
Right. Like a photograph. You look at a tree, I look at a tree, and we assume we're experiencing the exact same thing. And, I mean, it's comforting, right?
Yeah.
We like things to be tangible, to be obvious.
Yeah, we want the world to be solid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the way we interact with reality is actually a lot more like a blurry ink blot test? Like, what if the difference between seeing a physical object, or even the difference between believing in God and being an atheist, actually has nothing to do with objective facts and absolutely everything to do with how our brains categorize reality?
I mean, it is a complete paradigm shift because we are so accustomed to thinking of belief or even just physical existence as binary. Like, it's there or it isn't.
Right, right.
But when you actually look at the mechanical processes of human perception, the biology of it, that binary idea just falls apart completely. The way we construct our universe is, well, it's incredibly complex and deeply, deeply subjective.
And that is exactly what we're getting into today. We are exploring a truly mind-bending essay by author Xiaoyang Lin, and this is dated August 6, 2026.
It's a fascinating piece of writing.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the mission for this deep dive is to take you on Lin's philosophical journey, because we're going to start all the way down in the weeds of quantum physics, and then we'll move through the actual biology of how human eyes work.
Yeah, that part is wild.
It is. And we are going to land on a highly unique explanation for the fundamental difference between theists and atheists. Like, the
Yeah.
author weaves all this together to explain how human society even functions.
It's a very ambitious scope. Seriously. So, okay, let's unpack this, starting with the very foundation of how anything exists at all. Because Xiaoyang Lin starts with a premise that I tripped over at first. The argument is that for anything to exist in our human reality, it absolutely must have a concept attached to it first.
Right, so the concept is the prerequisite for existence. Like, without the concept, existence is impossible for us to even grasp.
See, I struggle with this. I mean, if I wake up in the middle of the night, it's pitch black, and I just violently stub my toe on a table leg.
Ouch. Right.
That table is there whether I have a philosophical concept for it or not. The pain is very real. So how can Lin claim the table doesn't exist without a concept?
Well, that is the natural objection, of course.
Sure.
But to understand Lin's point, we have to drop down to the level of modern physics and look at what that table actually is. Because ultimately, matter is fundamentally just energy.
Okay. If we look through the lens of physics, matter doesn't just, appear out of nowhere from invisible energy. It is energy. It's just locked into a different state.
Mm-hmm.
And Lin points directly to Einstein's mass-energy equivalence equation to explain this.
Oh, right, the famous E equals mc squared.
Precisely. That equation mathematically proves that mass and energy are entirely interchangeable. So matter that has mass, meaning the stuff made up of basic particles like quarks and electrons, the literal stuff that makes up the table you just stubbed your toe on,
Yep.
that can be converted into energy and vice versa. They are just two sides of the exact same cosmic coin. So you aren't really stubbing your toe on a solid, permanent object. You are interacting with a localized density of energy.
Okay, so the table's just energy. But the essay brings in some newer research to really, drive this home, right? From North Carolina State University, I think.
Yes, research led by Professor Larry M. Silverberg. And his work proposes a completely new way of looking at the fabric of the universe.
Which is pretty mind-blowing on its own.
It really is. Because instead of thinking of reality as being built out of tiny, solid billiard balls of matter, Silverberg's research suggests that the most basic building blocks of matter are actually fragments of energy.
Fragments of energy.
Exactly. It's a flowing, continuous stream of energy fragments.
Okay, so if the universe is essentially just a vast, churning ocean of energy fragments, we need a sort of conceptual cookie cutter to bunch out specific shapes from that energy and say, okay, this specific cluster of fragments is a table.
What's fascinating here is how that perfectly illustrates Lin's conclusion. In our ordinary everyday world, the physical universe is just a soup of energy.
A very dense soup sometimes.
Right, and when you stub your toe, you are certainly interacting with that energy soup. But for a specific chunk of that energy to exist as a distinct, recognizable object for us, a table, a chair, an apple, it requires a conceptual definition.
You have to draw a box around it.
You have to define its boundaries first, yeah. If you define it and everyone else accepts that definition, then that thing officially exists in our shared human reality. The raw energy is there, sure, but the thing only exists because of the concept.
Okay, so physics tells us the universe is a soup of energy until we define it. But how does that definition actually happen in practice? Like, if I'm looking at an apple on my kitchen counter, my brain isn't consciously doing quantum physics or calculating energy fragments. It feels instantaneous.
Well, to understand the mechanics of that, Lynn moves us from physics to biology. And think about the classic thought experiment here. Two people are looking at the exact same apple sitting on a table. Common sense tells us they're experiencing the exact same reality, right?
Yeah, obviously. It's the same apple.
But biologically, that is impossible.
Because their sensory systems are completely isolated from one another.
Yeah. Exactly. When you look at that apple, light is bouncing off the energy fragments that make up the apple, and that light enters your eye. But the specific electronic signals traveling down your optic nerve are unique to your biological hardware.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the final image of that apple gets reconstructed in basically the dark theater of your brain. And because your neural pathways are slightly different from the person standing next to you, the image reconstructed in your brain is actually different from the image reconstructed in theirs.
So we are just completely trapped in our own sensory experience.
We are.
And what blows my mind is that this isolated sensory experience is already incredibly limited to begin with. I mean, the essay points out just how narrow our window into reality really is. We were practically walking around in the dark.
It is a remarkably narrow sliver of the universe. Human biology dictates that we only see objects that reflect light within the visible spectrum, which is about 400 to 700 nanometers in wavelength.
Just that tiny band.
Right. So if an object reflects light with a wavelength below 400 nanometers, what we call ultraviolet, it is entirely invisible to the human eye.
So it's physically present in the room with us, but to us it just doesn't exist visually?
Not at all. And the same goes for anything above 700 nanometers, which is infrared. We are blind to the vast majority of the light spectrum.
That is wild to think about.
Yeah, so the tiny fraction of light we can see enters the eye, hits the brain's 3 receivers, and gets recorded. And according to Lynn's framework, these specific, highly filtered electronic signals processed by the brain, they form the foundation of human consciousness, cognition, wisdom, and ideology.
Because that's all we have to work with.
Exactly. Ultimately, these biological signals, these internal reconstructions of reality, are what guide all human behavior.
Wait. If my brain's apple is slightly different from your brain's apple, and we are both only seeing this tiny, microscopic 400 to 700 nanometer slice of the actual universe anyway, how do we ever agree on what is real?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, if I am trapped in my brain and you were trapped in yours, how do we function as a society without constantly clashing over our slightly different hallucinations?
Well, that is where Lynn introduces this really vital mechanism called language consensus. Because our internal biological realities are isolated and different, we have to build a bridge between them.
Okay.
So we use language to communicate our separate internal brain images to each other, and we negotiate an agreement. We form a consensus to basically call that specific collection of visual data an apple.
Ah. So the consensus isn't just the word itself, it's the agreed upon characteristics. Like, we agree that the concept of an apple includes being red, having a certain crunch, and growing on a tree. We basically build a shared conceptual bucket.
Exactly. We agree on the boundaries of the concept so we can operate in the same reality. But, and this is crucial, Lynn includes a very stark warning here about the mechanical fragility of this process.
What do you mean?
Well, according to the author's philosophical framework, this kind of true language consensus is entirely dependent on an environment of free speech.
Wait, how so? Why is free speech a mechanical necessity here rather than just like a nice political ideal?
Well, think about the feedback loop we just discussed. If I'm going to compare my internal sensory data with yours to reach an agreement, we have to be able to communicate honestly, right?
Yeah, obviously.
So in an unfree environment where speech is restricted or punished, that feedback loop is severed. Language ceases to be a tool for mutual consensus and becomes a weapon of control.
No, because you aren't allowed to debate the characteristics of the concept anymore.
Precisely. The powerful dictate the concept to the powerless. If you cannot freely compare notes and debate the boundaries of a concept, you aren't building a shared reality together. You are simply being forced to inhabit someone else's mandated reality. The consensus just becomes artificial.
Man, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
You need the freedom to stress test the concept to make sure it actually holds water for everyone. And, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the essay doesn't just stop at physical objects like apples or tables.
No, it goes much deeper.
Right. It takes all of this, the energy fragments, the biological limits of the eye, the necessity of a conceptual cookie cutter built through language, and applies it to the invisible. Specifically, Lin applies this entire framework to the concept of God.
Yes. And to bridge that gap from physical objects to abstract theology, Lin uses a brilliant analogy about a fish.
Yes. The fish example is what made this all finally click for me. So imagine you are standing on the bank of a river, looking into the water. You know a fish is a fish, not just because you see a splash, but because you already have a defined concept of a fish in your head.
Exactly.
You have a mental checklist. It's aquatic, it breathes with gills, it swims with fins, it usually has scales, and it's cold-blooded.
It is the concept that allows for the recognition. I mean, if you didn't have that mental checklist, you would just see a shimmering blob moving through the water. You wouldn't know what it was. You can only determine if a fish is in the river because you already possess the conceptual definition of fish.
And this is where Shouyang Lin makes the massive leap to atheism, which is really the core focus of this entire essay. The author argues that atheists are atheists simply because they do not have a concept of God.
It's a bold claim.
It is.
Yeah.
Or I guess their concept is so entirely different from a theist's concept that they aren't even looking for the same thing in the river, so to speak.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally reframes the whole theological debate. Because usually we think an atheist is someone who has impartially examined all the universe's evidence and empirically proven God doesn't exist.
Sure, that's the common perception.
But according to Lin's framework, an atheist is like someone looking at that river without knowing what gills or scales or fins are. They simply don't have the conceptual net to catch the data. They couldn't spot the fish even if it jumped out of the water and splashed them because they have no definition for it in their language consensus.
So if you're listening to this right now and you consider yourself an atheist, Lin isn't saying you're ignoring facts. He's saying your brain is literally not conceptually equipped to categorize the universe in the way a theist does.
Yes.
Which completely changes how we argue about religion at the dinner table.
Yes.
It's not a debate over facts. It's a debate over the existence of the conceptual cookie cutter. But that begs a massive question. How does the author actually define God, then? What is the concept?
Well, Lin offers a very specific, almost scientific concept of God in the text. God is the creator, certainly. But specifically, Lin argues that God is the laws of nature.
Interesting.
Yeah, the fundamental natural laws that govern the creation, functioning, and eventual decay of all things. Because natural laws undeniably exist and govern the universe, therefore, God exists. God is that system of natural law.
Wait, if Lin is just redefining God as the laws of nature, isn't that a bit of a cop-out? I mean, any atheist believes in gravity or thermodynamics or the speed of light. If an atheist accepts gravity and God is gravity, how does calling it God suddenly make someone a theist?
That is the crucial distinction Lin is making, actually. It isn't just about acknowledging that gravity makes an apple fall. It is about how you categorize that law within your consciousness.
Okay, explain that.
Well, an atheist might observe the laws of nature as cold, accidental phenomena, right? Just the way the energy fragments happen to behave. But a theist, possessing the concept of God, views those same natural laws as the deliberate design of a creator. They revere the laws as divine architecture.
Ah, so they are looking at the exact same physical universe, the exact same 400 to 700 nanometer slice of reality, but because they have completely different conceptual frameworks, they essentially inhabit completely different realities.
Exactly. That divergence is everything. It separates the mere observer of nature from the person who sees a divine order behind it.
Okay, let's explore the theist's reality then. Because if an atheist is defined by lacking this specific conceptual net, what defines a theist in Lin's framework? Are they just anyone who says the word God?
No, not quite. Lin is very clear that theists might not all believe in the exact same version of God. You know, the specifics of their deities, their rituals, and their dogmas, those might vary wildly from person to person or culture to culture.
Right, obviously.
But what unites them, what categorically makes them theists, is that they all share a defined concept called God, and they firmly, unequivocally believe in its existence as a higher power governing reality.
So they have the concept and they trust the concept completely. But the essay goes much further into the psychological impact of holding that concept, right? Like it isn't just a passive belief you check on a census form.
Oh, far from it. Lin details a rigorous psychological requirement for the theist. To hold this concept effectively, they must deeply ponder what God is. They have to engage in profound spiritual cultivation.
That sounds intense.
It is. It requires immense mental discipline to maintain an unwavering conviction in their belief. Their very identity is fundamentally anchored by their faith in that concept.
So, what does this all mean for the rest of us? I mean, how does this internal psychological state of having a concept of God actually translate into the real world? Like, does it change how people behave on a Tuesday at the grocery store?
According to Lynn, it changes the entire trajectory of human civilization.
Wow. Okay.
Because people with this kind of deep faith are convinced that their views are correct, because they have anchored themselves to this immutable, higher concept. They possess a unique kind of courage. They have the courage to take decisive action in the world.
Because they aren't constantly second-guessing the foundational nature of reality. They have a bedrock.
Exactly. And with that bedrock comes accountability. Crucially, the author argues that because of this deep reverence for their concept of the divine, because they believe in a higher law of nature, they are willing to bear the consequences and responsibilities of their actions.
Oh, I see.
They hold themselves accountable not just to a human judge, but to the Creator.
So, if they do something wrong, they believe there's a fundamental, universal consequence, whether anyone catches them or not.
Yes. And when you have a critical mass of people who act with courage and take absolute responsibility for their actions based on a higher law, you build social credit. You build trust between individuals in a very chaotic world.
It's almost as if having a rock-solid conceptual anchor, that concept of God or natural law, doesn't just keep them grounded internally. It acts as a tether that makes them reliable to others in the real world.
That's a great way to put it.
You know what you are getting with them because they are bound by rules that transcend their own immediate self-interest.
And that tether is really the capstone of Lynn's entire argument. It is what the author identifies as the origin of the spirit of contract in human society.
The spirit of contract.
Right. The culminating point of the essay is that it is precisely these people of faith, those who revere the divine and have cultivated that concept of God, who establish this foundational spirit of contract.
Like the actual sociological ability to make a promise, sign an agreement, and trust that the other party will uphold it.
Because a contract only works if both parties believe in consequences. Theists, according to Lynn, brought that reliability into human interactions because they answer to a higher conceptual reality. They basically laid the groundwork for the trust networks that allow complex societies to even exist.
Wow. It really is a sweeping journey. Just to recap for you listening, because we covered a lot of ground today. We started with Professor Silverberg's research that the universe is made of flowing energy fragments, and Einstein showing us that matter is just energy.
Yep.
And then we learned that our biology, our eyes, only capture a tiny fraction of that energy, between 400 and 700 nanometers, meaning our perception is incredibly limited.
And because our biological perception is so isolated, we have to rely on language consensus to build a shared reality, which mechanically requires free speech, so we can honestly debate those concepts rather than having them dictated to us.
Right. And all of that physical and biological groundwork leads to Cheyenne Lynn's ultimate thesis on religion. The fundamental difference between atheists and theists isn't about intelligence or stubbornly ignoring facts. It comes down to how we define our concepts.
Exactly.
An atheist simply lacks the conceptual definition of God, much like looking at a river without knowing what a fish is. Meanwhile, the theist uses that concept defined by Lynn as the deliberate laws of nature, as a psychological anchor.
A very necessary anchor.
Yeah, and that anchor cultivates courage, accountability, and the trust that historically formed the very spirit of contract holding human society together. It is an incredibly thought-provoking way to look at how we build our world. Thank you so much for coming on this deep dive with us today and exploring this complex terrain.
This raises an important question, though, for everyone listening. If, as the author suggests, our reality is entirely dependent on the concepts we agree upon through language, what happens to our shared reality when our language becomes overly simplified?
Oh, that's dark.
Or when we stop taking the time to define our concepts together? If we lose the words to define our shared values, do the values themselves cease to exist?